This video is meant to be a quick introduction to Adobe Photoshop. I'll show you some of the basic editing techniques that I like to use to improve my aerial photos. You can see here I have a batch of raw aerial photos. These are .dng files from the Inspire 1 camera, and I've picked out this one that I like. And one thing that I don't like about this image is how dark the ground is. I like the dark sky, but it'd be nice to be able to lighten this up. So I'm going to open this in Adobe Photoshop and see what we can do. I'm just going to drag this down to Photoshop. And anytime you open a raw image in Photoshop, you're going to get this camera raw dialog that's going to open up first before the image is actually opened in Photoshop itself. And this dialog is very much like the dialog in Adobe Lightroom. You'll notice that all these sliders are pretty much the same as in the previous lesson, in the Lightroom lesson. And in fact, they are doing the same thing to the image. It is important to remember that Photoshop can be destructive. So if you open this image and make changes to it and then save it without changing the file name or the location of the file that you're saving, you will override the original image, which may not be what you intend to do. So it's important to keep in mind when you're editing in Photoshop, try to remember to use the Save As. I always use the Save As button and save it as a new image somewhere else. I like to maintain my original images in case I'd like to go back and do something different with them later on. So in this camera raw interface, we're going to go ahead and mess with some of these sliders just to see what happens. We can warm this up a little bit. And then the exposure is pretty good. Like I said, I'd like to just lighten up this bottom part of the image, the ground that is so dark. And to do that, I'm going to try using the shadow slider. So I'm just going to slide this over, and it should just affect the shadows. And in fact, as I slide that over, you can see that mostly just that ground image was affected. If I slide it back, you can see how dark that gets. I'm going to increase that just a little bit more. And then if I increase the contrast, it's going to help bring out some of the structure in those clouds. In fact, I'm going to bring the contrast pretty high for this image. And then clarity is another slider here that will help bring out some of the structure in those clouds and really make it dramatic. Might add just a little bit of vibrance, a little bit of saturation. And then if you click here in this tab, this is the detail tab, you can add just a little bit of sharpening. Again, a lot of this is subjective. You just have to play around and see what it is that you like. We might see what the highlights do here. So if I bring that down, you'll get a little more detail there in the sky, in the highlight part of the sky. And I think I like that. So this is looking pretty good. I've got some good contrast and structure in the clouds here in this rainstorm. But the ground is still not quite what I was hoping for as far as how light the ground is. I'd like to kind of bring out some more of the color and details in this. To do that, I'm going to continue on to Photoshop, and I'm going to show you the power of layers in Photoshop to improve your images. So this is just the raw dialog box, and we're going to go ahead and click open. And now we have that image with those edits that we made to the raw interface now in the Photoshop interface. So here's that layer. It's a background layer. I'm just going to hit Command J, or that'd be Control J in Windows, to duplicate that layer. So now I have the background layer and the layer above it that's exactly the same. And I'm going to show you how I can now make changes to this image and combine it with the bottom layer in order to get more of the result that I want. So I have the top layer selected, and I'm going to go up to Filter and the Camera Raw filter. And this is a filter that acts just like that Camera Raw dialog that we opened when we first opened the image. So I'm going to click that. And now I'm going to adjust the image, and I'm not going to worry. I've got the sky how I want it. So I'm not going to worry about the sky. I'm only going to change this to edit the ground portion of the image. So I'm going to do that by increasing the exposure quite a bit. And I might add a little more clarity and saturation, vibrance. And that's closer to what I had in mind for that ground. I want that pretty bright. And you can see now that we've lost a lot of detail in the sky by doing that. But that's okay. So we're going to hit OK. And we've applied those changes now to this top layer. And I want to keep the sky from the bottom layer. So what I'm going to do is create a mask on this top layer that's going to mask out the sky and keep just the ground. So to do that, I'm going to keep the top layer selected, and I'm going to come down to this add layer mask tool and select that, and you'll see that we've created a mask now that's attached to this top layer. And you can actually deselect that mask. So I'm going to make sure that mask is selected, and then we're going to paint a mask with the brush tool. So over here is the brush tool, and the way this works is if you are painting on a mask like we are, so we're painting on the mask, not the image, but the mask layer. If you're painting black, so I have got black here, if you're painting black, it's going to erase or mask out that portion of the image that you're painting onto. So you can see that I'm literally painting a mask here, and I'm doing so with a fairly large brush, and the hardness is all the way down, so it's a large soft edged brush, and that will help fade in the sky with the ground. So I'm just going to paint, and in fact I'm painting 100% opacity, 100% flow. And if you look over here, you can kind of see that most of this is now black, and the bottom section, that's where the ground is white. So that mask is letting the ground show through, and then it's using the sky from the layer below it. Now if we screw up, say I screwed up and I painted in too much of this down here, we can actually just switch and start painting white to paint back that part of the image. So you can swap this here. Now I've got the white loaded into the brush, and I can paint back that mask. So just like that, we've now adjusted these two parts of the image. We've adjusted the ground to be really bright and the sky to stay fairly dark. We've combined those two into a image that has a higher dynamic range than the original image. If we pull up that original image, you can see it here. You can see there's quite a big difference. It's a much more pleasing, a much more dramatic image than the original image straight from the camera. From here, I can save this image out. I like to save out a Photoshop master so I can go back in and re-edit this if I want. And then for sharing, I like to save it as a JPEG. So if I want to put it on Instagram or Facebook, I'll save it as a JPEG and name it something meaningful, and then save it out, and we're good to go. So that's just a real quick look at editing aerial photos in Photoshop. I hope you got something from this lesson, and we'll see you in the next video.